suppose you are allowed to consume some consumption units, which is little gamma A plus some very small epsilon. So if you are able to choose which this is agricultural consumption or manufacturing consumption or service consumption, which part of the consumption give you the highest marginal utility? Okay, the first part, right? So the first part give you why? Because suppose you are this is the Cope-Douglas part. Think about the Cope-Douglas. Let's first write down the first part. CAE minus gamma A. Beta A. Okay. You take the first order derivative to get the marginal utility. Then you get CAT minus gamma A, eta A minus 1. Okay, and you have eta A outside. So here, this fraction tells you that all these index sum up to 1, and each of them are positive. Is positive. So the eta A minus 1 should be negative. So in another word, this is equal to eta A. You have CA minus gamma A in the denominator. So now if CA is very close to gamma A, that means your denominator is getting very close to 0. So as a result, this ratio will get close to infinity. So this utility function can capture the idea that people really need to have some enough food in order to live. Okay. So they capture this by having some marginal utility close to infinity if you don't have very much food. So if the amount of food you can acquire is getting very close to gamma A, then as a result, your marginal utility from having agricultural products will be infinite. So that's the reason why once you don't have much money, you will first allocate a lot of your resource on agricultural products. And once you get more and more resource, then the denominator will get larger and larger. It's getting far and far away from 0. That means the expression of these parts now becomes a normal number. And as a result, the coefficient before that started greater. If this one's very large, infinity, then you don't care about the coefficient anymore. But if this one is a normal number, you have enough food, then this one plays a role. And you will compare the gamma A, gamma B, gamma M, and the gamma S to see which one is larger to decide which part you consume more. If you have enough food. But if you don't have enough food, that doesn't happen. You simply buy food. Okay. So that's the idea of this Stone-Geary utility function. It's an easier way to capture people's demand for food. And we have the opposite effects for the service sector. You plus something. So which means if you minus something, then your marginal utility gets larger. If plus something, your marginal utility gets smaller. Right? So that means once you don't have much money, you may not even want to consume any service sector goods. We have 3 sectors. We assume that the 3 sectors are having the production function like this. So they may have different capital, they may have different labor, and they may have different, this is the industry-specific technology level. But the functional form of the production function will be identical across all the production functions. We want to remove the supply side effect, focus on the demand side. So we try to have the supply side as homogeneous as possible. And we also have some big X, which is the Harold neutral technology here. It's labor augmented technology. And this technology is doing the same across all the sectors. We do so also to remove all the supply side effects. We focus on the demand side. And capital is allocated across 3 different sectors, and labor, the same thing. And we have the market clearing for goods markets. So this one is an indicator function. The indicator function means if J is equal to M, then this function is 1. If J is not equal to M, then this function is 0. So the expression tells you that if you are in the manufacturing sector, the goods you produce is used to accumulate capital and also consume. Little c is the consumption for each individual, and L is the number of labor. So the left-hand side is how you spend the resource. The right-hand side is how much you produce. And in other sectors, like the agriculture sector and the service sector, we do not use the goods produced by those sectors to make capital. Of course, capital is manufacturing good. So the 3 different sectors have different market clearing conditions. Only the manufacturing sector goods can be used to accumulate capital. So now, based on the Stone-Geary utility aggregator, we will be able to obtain these 2 optimality conditions for consumption. So what does this mean? It looks weird, it comes from nowhere, but it's actually closely following the property of Cope-Douglas function. We know that once you have Cope-Douglas function, you have the share for each part will be constant. Okay. In the production function, the capital share and labor share will be constant. And in the consumption problem, the share for agricultural products or the manufacturing products and the service product will be constant if you have Cope-Douglas. However, we are not having the Cope-Douglas. We have something similar to Cope-Douglas, but with the Stone-Geary inside. Okay. But luckily, in terms of mathematics, we can simply use a new notation for something inside. Okay, we can define the inside by some effective consumption of agriculture, and define the inside by some effective consumption of service. Then we go back to the same problem of the Cope-Douglas function, and you optimize the input or optimize the input bar. Okay. So as a result, if you consider this part as a whole, okay, the effective agricultural products, then this is the spending on that. Okay. And we normalize the manufacturing sector to have the price equal to 1. So the numerator here is actually your spending on the manufacturing goods. So this first equation tells you that the ratio between your spending on agriculture after some adjustment divided by the index of the power in the product Cope-Douglas function should be equal to the manufacturing sector. This is exactly the property of Cope-Douglas function, that you always have some constant share. And the second part is the same, it's for the service sector. And we have the competitive market with some rental rate and the wage rate given by the marginal product of capital and labor. Okay, so in order to start analyzing the model, we have to make one assumption, assuming that in the very beginning, the economy is big enough to produce enough food. Okay, so this is the zero capital, zero technology, and zero labor. It has to be enough to produce gamma agricultural products. Otherwise, people will always produce food without any investment. Okay. Because they have to consume gamma A. If you don't produce enough gamma A, they always consume agricultural products. Only if you have have more than this agricultural, the necessary agricultural product, can you start to accumulate income? So this is the assumption for meaningful analysis. So here comes the first result. In this model, we will, once this condition is satisfied, we will always have the effective capital labor ratio identical across all the sectors. Okay, so why? We have 3 different sectors, but all the 3 sectors will have the same effective capital labor ratio. Why? Let me try to pick up someone to answer this question. Okay. Wang Xiaoying. You? Please. Why are these identical costs in sectors?
Function, and since we have an assumption that all of the function is larger than
I don't think should be one.
so for as we satisfy the assumption, then the manufacturer and the service should be has the same ratio.
So let me ask you another question. Suppose they have different ratio, what will happen? You may want to go back to here. This is your production function. Of course, it satisfies constant return to scale. We always have constant return to scale. So you may think about. So you may tell me what determines the wage and interest rate. What will be wage and interest rate equal to if you are in a competitive market? Yeah, interest rate. So usually you have a model with constant return to scale, you have competitive markets, and you will always have some conditions for the wage and the interest rate, right? So what will be that? It's a demand. So in terms of mathematical equations, what will be that? Yeah, it's related to demand, but what's the mathematical one? So so you may think about one firm. If one firm is in competitive market, so that firm will make zero profit, right? So that means the marginal cost from labor is wage. So what's the marginal benefit of labor? Benefits of labor. If you have the production function, in terms of mathematical. So what's that? Oh, that's fine. Okay, that's fine. So so you may have a seat. No problem. Okay. So maybe this is a jumping too ahead of. We can think about competitive markets. So if the firms have the same marginal cost of labor or the capital to the revenue of that. So that means your marginal products of labor and the capital will be equal to the marginal cost of that. The marginal product will be the first order derivative of production function. So that will be equal to the wage and the interest rate. So now we can do let's try to do some work here. Okay, so suppose we have a production function like this. This is constant return to scale. Okay, this is the rental rate. Okay. we can take cost dollars as an example. It's true. It's true generally, but the proof is complex. Let's ignore that. So the first order condition will be alpha k over L. Alpha minus 1 into R. So what does it mean? It means that the interest rate will be equal to something related to the capital position. If you have the technology inside, it will be equal to some effective capital position. So the idea is, once you are in a competitive market, all the different sectors should have the same interest rate and same wage rate. Otherwise, people will have incentive to reallocate the resources. Okay? So if that is true, if we also have the same production function for each sector, then we should have the same capital ratio for all the sectors. You may have different B outside, maybe BJ or anything, but that so it seems that something is wrong here. Okay, I'm actually asking. Okay, so I see. This is more complex than I thought. So, of course, if all the sectors have the same production function, you should have the capital ratio. But in our problem, they do not have the same production function. We have some B outside. Okay. So Wang Xiaoying, I actually thought this was a simple question, but it's actually very difficult. Sorry for that. So, okay. Well. So in this model, this is complex because we have this BJ are different here, and I guess I have a typo here because each sector has its own price, right? You have to multiply by the production function by the price. So the price times the production function is revenue, and you take the first order condition, that will be equal to your marginal cost. So it will be some price outside, and in this model, if the price, so I thought that the price is something we derived from here, but now it seems to be something that we used to derive that. Okay, so let me think more about it. But the idea is that in this model, you will in the end have some price of the goods for each sector, which is equal to the inverse of the technology in that sector. If the price, if the technology of that sector is higher, then the price will be lower. So it's given by this, is this equation. So in the end, if you have price outside before the B, okay, the B times P from here will be Bn. So you will get some constant terms after the price adjustment. But anyway, so what's the proof of that? I need to think about that. I thought it was thinkable, but it's not. So let's now keep this as given. So suppose we know that in the model we have a constant capital ratio across all the sectors, and what makes this happen is that we have different prices for each sector. in a sector with more productive, higher productivity, we have lower price levels, such that we can always have this expression like this. Okay. So now, as a growth model, we can think about the demand side. So if we have a Cobb-Douglas function, of course, each part of the consumption will take in a share of the resource, and in the end, all of the products will grow in the same rate. But now we have Storm Jerry utility. In a Storm Jerry utility, you have a consumption aggregator C in the end. Okay, so the aggregator C will be growing at some growth rate given by R minus rho here. And we know that the Storm Jerry utility function, the inside part is Cobb-Douglas. The outside part is not. So the inside part will be growing in the same rate as the C aggregator. So this is the right hand side from optimum control as we have before. So this is the property we have. And then from this condition, if we also know that price is related to technology, then you could get this condition. You simply replace the price here, the price here with the technology here. Okay, then you get this. So there is some interesting thing you can read from these two equations. If you know that the consumption of manufacturing sector is growing at some rate, and then this agricultural consumption minus some gamma will be growing at some growth rate. Okay. So this tells you how the growth in this sector and this sector related to each other. So once we know this condition, and then you can get the constant growth path. This is different from the balanced growth path. In the balanced growth path, everything is balanced. In the constant growth path, we have the constant capital ratio in all sectors because we have the constant interest rate, all the things. However, we have different growth rate for different sectors. In the manufacturing sector, we show that it is G, but in the agriculture sector and in the service sector, it is not G because you see. Okay, so. So how should we get here from there? Okay, C. So the growth rate of CA minus gamma A will be equal to the growth rate of CN. Okay, this is from this condition. And as a result, the growth rate of C. So what's the connection between the? So you have the growth rate of this is the growth rate of the agriculture sector. This is G, according to here. Okay, because the growth rate of this one is G, the growth rate of that one is G. So this expression is G, and then this expression is equal to A. This is the numerator, and the denominator you can rearrange this. you can move this term to the right-hand side. You'll be able to get the growth rate of agriculture sector. It's different from manufacturing sector. We know that this ratio is smaller than 1, okay, because you subtract something from the numerator. So as a result, the growth rate of agriculture sector will be lower than the growth rate of manufacturing sector, and the service sector will be growing faster. And this part is quite pretty standard. And you also have some growth rate in labor. And here, this condition plays a role. Let me show you why we need this condition satisfied. We know that in the economy, the agricultural sector is growing slower, and the service sector is growing faster. And because all these sectors have a similar production function, so that means in the economy, when the economy is growing, we continue reallocating the inputs of capital and labor from the agriculture sector to other sectors. So in this economy, we have assumed a constant growth rate in labor. Then if we want to have a constant growth rate in which the manufacturing sector is growing at the rate G, then that means the manufacturing sector is growing in the same rate as the economy as a whole. So as a result, all the inputs, the labor and the capital in the manufacturing sector will be growing in the same rate as the aggregate. Because you have the same capital labor ratio, you have the same F function. Okay. Same capital labor ratio, you increase everything proportionally. So the middle, the manufacturing sector will be growing the same speed. If that happens, so we are actually shifting the labor from agriculture sector to the service sector. Okay, because the manufacturing sector is growing balanced. And if that happens, we have to make sure that the labor that is shifted out from the agriculture sector will be consistent with the fact that you consume less and less agricultural product. That's for the production function. Okay, and the same thing happens to the service sector. And on the second hand, we need to make sure that the labor that moves out from the agricultural sector will be exactly equal to the labor that move in the service sector, such that the manufacturing sector can grow balanced. Okay. So once you take that into account, and then you'll be able to solve the labor and then the service sector growth rate. And we really need this condition to hold. Otherwise, you cannot have what I described happen. Okay, so the idea to solve this model, it's not hard. So first, we want to have a constant growth rate, constant growth path. So we want to have the manufacturing sector growth balanced. And then we know that all the growth rate of the inputs. Okay. Then we try to, we also can solve for the growth rate of the first sector and the third sector. And then we use the consistency between the production function and the demand of consumption to solve for the resource that is used in the agricultural product and in the service sector. And we make sure that the labor that moves out from the first sector will be equal to the labor move into the third sector. Then we will be able to get this condition. This condition must be satisfied such that everything like this can happen. So we don't do the math behind this. It's kind of tedious. but you know the idea of this. Constant growth fast. So from this model, we knew that once we have the strong jury utility function, people will like the agricultural product less and less as they get more and more incomes. So as a result, the economy will grow non-balanced. We can set a parameter such that the model is easy to solve. We have a situation in which the manufacturing is more balanced here, and the other two are unbalanced. So that explains what happens in the United States. You see the manufacturing sector is relatively constant across 100 years, but the other two sectors simply shifting between time. So of course, this model has a lot of shortcomings. So first, once you don't have this parameter satisfied, you will have some, you won't be able to get the constant growth path, and the model will be very complex to solve. And also, in this model, the relative prices between different sectors are fixed. So for here, okay. So the manufacturing sector, the price has been normalized to 1. But the price for other sectors are given by the technology level. So that means the price of different sectors does not change across time. This is of course not true in the data. In the data, the price for manufacturing goods will be lower and lower across time. The relative price for agricultural goods will be higher and higher. Okay. So that means this model, of course, does not capture the whole picture of the non-balanced growth. So that's the reason why we want to think about other models. We have a supply-side model. The supply-side model, this full model is very complex. I simply take one part of the model out and try to use the part to emphasize something. We do not try to solve the full model. So in this model, we have a final output aggregated through these two different sectors, sector A and sector B. You can think about the sector A as the agricultural sector and the sector B as the manufacturing sector. Okay. So the two sectors now have totally different production technology. They have different technology level and different production functions. Okay. And also, market clearing condition requires that the capital add up to the aggregate one. The labor is the same. Assume there's no capital depreciation for simplicity. Okay. Okay, so we have some final good producer like this, right? This final good producer are taking the goods from the first sector and the second sector to make the final goods. So as before, the final sector, final good producer are competitive, they make no profits, and they have the marginal products equal to the marginal cost. And we normalize the price of the final good to 1. So as a result, this F take the first order condition with respect to Y1 is the marginal product from using 1 unit of Y1 goods. Okay, this should be equal to the cost of Y1 goods, which is P1. And okay, so for P2 the same thing. So the ratio will hold. So we also have the competitive labor and the rental markets. In these two markets, the wage is equal to the marginal product of labor in two sectors, and the rental rate is the same thing. And now, in order to characterize the model even further, we want to impose some assumptions on the functional forms. So first, the final good producer is using C as aggregator as before, as we have here. Okay? We have this many times, C as aggregator. And we also have the Cobb-Douglas function for each sector. But now, alpha 1 and alpha 2 are different. So that means they may potentially have different capital liberations. Well, we also assume that the technology can grow exogenously at different rates. So these two sectors are really, really imbalanced. Now, we want to know what will happen in the economy now. So as we have derived before, the price index on the C as aggregator will be something like this, right? That's for the infinite number of products. You have to take integrals. Now, you have two types of goods. And by doing the same thing, you can solve that. The right-hand side will be the price index for aggregating the two goods using the same approach here. And then we normalize the price to 1. So we have the condition here. And by solving the final good producers problem here, we can also solve for the demand for each variety. Here we can have the demand for each of the sectors goods. And you see that there is elasticity minus epsilon here. If you take the price as given and solve for a quantity. And here we take the quantity as given and solve for the price. That will be the inverse of that. So that's 1 over epsilon. So you have all this satisfied. And the wage rate and the interest rate will be solved out. Now, the interesting part of this model is that the two sectors can grow in a very different patterns. And there are some reallocation effects between these two sectors that can be summarized in this lemma. This lemma, we denote kappa as the share of capital you allocate to the first sector and the whole economy. And lambda as the share of labor you allocate to the first sector in the economy. And this two share has expressions like this in the competitive equilibrium. That happens because you are able to use all the things you have right here. So for example, you have this equalized to each other, right? So then from this equation, you can solve out the ratio between K1 and K2. That should be a function of Y1 and Y2 and Y, but Y is a function of Y1 and Y2. So in the end, the ratio of K1 over K2 will be a function of the ratio between Y1 and Y2 from the last equation. Okay. Once you know the ratio between Y1 and Y2, you can solve for the ratio between Y1 over Y1 plus Y2. Sorry, K1 over K1 plus K2. So that's here, K1 over K. Okay. So from here we know that must be some equation of the ratio K1 Y1 and Y2. You do the algebra and then you solve out like this. And the algebra is tedious. You can do it by yourself from all the conditions here. But the ideal is to show the reallocation effects from these two equations. Let's first take a look at the first equation. The first equation gives you the share of capital in the first sector. It is determined by the ratio between the products of the two sectors. We can see that if epsilon is smaller than 1, then if this ratio is larger, then this kappa is smaller. What's the economic intuition? So epsilon here is the parameter in the production function. So the economic implication of the epsilon is the elasticity of substitution between different types of goods. Okay. So if this number is high, epsilon is very large. Suppose we can take epsilon goes to infinity. Okay. So this ratio becomes 1. This ratio becomes 1. Outside becomes 1. Then the utility becomes linear. That means you don't really care whether you have y1 or y2. It's a perfect substitute. On the other side, if epsilon is really small, that means these two are complementary. Okay. Substitute means you don't really care about A or B. Complementary means that if you have one, if you have A, you also want to have B. Okay. So let's go back. If epsilon is smaller than 1, that means the substitution between two types of goods is actually very small. That means the two goods are complementary. We just say that if the sector 1 over sector 2, this ratio gets larger, then okay, so suppose this ratio gets smaller, okay. Suppose we have something happens in the second sector, say like the manufacturing sector. In the manufacturing sector, if y2 produce more, then the ratio gets smaller, and this positive, and the whole thing gets smaller, and -1, this thing gets positive, or get bigger. If that happens, that means increase in the product in the manufacturing sector, in the second sector, actually reallocates the capital to the first sector. This one, as this one gets larger, this one gets larger. Okay. So what does this mean? It means if the first sector and the second sector do not substitute so much, they are complementary. So if you have more goods in the second sector, you also want to have more goods in the first sector because they are complementary. Just like your left shoe and the right shoe. You have the left shoe, you want to have the right shoe. So that is the intuition. If epsilon is smaller. If epsilon is larger than 1, things will go differently. If you have more product in the second sector, this ratio gets smaller. You reallocate the capital from the first sector to the second sector. So that means if you are able to produce more in the second sector, why not produce even more? So in that situation, these two goods are substitutable, highly substitutable. You don't really need to have 1. If you are able to produce 2, why not just produce 2? So as a result, this kappa will be smaller, and you reallocate capital to the second sector. So this is the non-balance effect from the model. And also, you have some similar things from lambda, between lambda and the kappa. If kappa is higher, then this is lower, and the whole thing is higher. So that means kappa higher means lambda is also higher. So if one sector attracts more capital, this sector also attracts more labor. So remember, the reason why the capital reallocates from one sector to the other sector is because the substitution in the goods market. Okay. So now the goods is produced by capital and the labor. So that means the reallocation effects should be the same across the capital input and the labor input. So as a result, if the substitution between the goods is in some level such that you have a larger and a larger second sector in terms of capital, then you will always have a larger and larger employment share in the second sector. Okay, so one sector is becoming bigger. That's the idea of non-balance, the reallocation of capital labor through the number. And we also have some even more results from non-balance flow.